as well as globally, really looking to be a tool of intelligence and solutions for essentially the energy sector and oil and gas stakeholders as they try to navigate the tsunami, that's going towards decarbonization. I'm joined here today with three distinguished guest speakers. We have Dr. Steve Griffiths, Senior Vice President, Research and Development at Khalifa University, Dr. Joaquin Naro, Managing Director, Alcazar Investment, and Thomas Engelman, Head of Energy Transition at Kagol Investment Management. Thank you all for joining us. I just want to start the podcast as we normally do and go around the table and look at our weekly news digest of the top articles and headlines that we've seen. Steve, can you just choose an article that you feel stood out to you the most from this week's digest?
Sure, and thanks, Brian, for inviting me again to the podcast. It's a very interesting session here today. It looks like we're very hydrogen dominant, so I'll pick a hydrogen-based topic. The one that interests me is Gazprom's blue hydrogen production. I do quite a bit of work with Russia. For those that are familiar with Gazprom, major energy company in Russia, the largest supplier of gas to Europe. I think it makes sense for Gazprom to be pursuing blue hydrogen. For those that don't know what blue hydrogen is, it is typically steam methane reforming coupled with carbon capture. So it gives you a low carbon form of hydrogen. For Russia, I think it makes sense. If we're going to energy transition, we're trying to keep the major oil and gas exporting countries in play. They're going to want to find a way to monetize their hydrocarbon resources in an economy or a global economy, which is much more focused on sustainability. That said, there's one caveat I'll mention about this Gazprom initiative, which needs to be thought about in the context of blue hydrogen. There's a lot of discussion these days about the entire value chain emissions from blue hydrogen. So we're not just talking about the methane reforming, the energy used to heat up the reformer and those kind of carbon emissions that have to be captured, but also in the entire production of natural gas. So when we're trying to make the argument for blue hydrogen, I'm sure Russia will need to do this itself, we need to be very careful about thinking on how we can mitigate the emissions from the natural gas supply chain. And so, the best practice today, we see some companies able to get down their total emissions from methane to be less than 1% of total production. I think the industry average about 1.5%. Russia doesn't do quite as well. I'm not going to give the numbers, but I think if they're going to be a major player in this area, they're going to have to look at their entire supply chain of natural gas, methane, and try to mitigate those emissions. And then I think they can make a credible argument for wanting to be a player in energy transition through hydrogen.
What is your thoughts on? We've seen it recently in the UK with policymakers stepping down from a council over blue hydrogen. Overall in blue hydrogen, your thoughts on the kind of controversy that we're seeing around it as opposed to jumping right to green hydrogen, I think mostly in Europe in that sense.
Well, I think blue hydrogen, what the argument is today is blue hydrogen can be available very quickly to get it to scale up the utilization of hydrogen relative to green hydrogen. We have steam methane reformers. They're being used for refineries, clearly. They're used a lot for the chemical industry, particularly ammonia. When you have the available supply of gray hydrogen producing emissions and you can quickly couple carbon capture, hopefully find some utilization or cost-effective storage to deal with the carbon emissions, then you've got a way to connect, hopefully what we see as growing demand to a source of supply. The trick in trying to balance green and blue hydrogen is figuring out where you take the green scale up, how you ensure you're getting scale up of green, so that you're able to ride those efficiencies you can have with economies of scale and increased manufacturing of electrolyzers and trying to deploy more low carbon electricity, while you try to build up your hydrogen demand and batch that with supply through blue hydrogen. So I'm a fan of blue hydrogen to the extent it'll get the hydrogen economies going. I think it is very helpful for major hydrocarbon exporting countries, but we need to balance that with the green initiatives.
Dr. Joaquin, I just want to bring you in to get your thoughts on, of course, which article stands out to you the most from this digest, and then also your point of view on low carbon. If you think, as I know that your institution looks at kind of the consequences of new green technology, if you think that that's a viable route to focus on.
I think from the article perspective, thank you, Brian, for the invitation today. But I think from the article perspective, I would tend to agree with Dr. Griffith on the Gazprom eyeing the blue hydrogen production. But I would like to add also a slightly different perspective as well, as we have seen over the last few weeks, months, the gas prices in Europe have rallied to record highs. We haven't seen gas prices this high, and not post 2008, no pre-2008, even when we had some extreme events in 2005. We haven't seen this type of gas prices before, not so sustainable. And this has deep implications, obviously, for Gazprom potential for developing gas investments and so on, and also for the plans to, if in the future you are to replace gas with hydrogen somehow, obviously they want to be part of the equation. But why it jumps at me is how the very, very expensive gas prices that we have right now are going to feed through the cost of blue hydrogen as we go forward, because we are accustomed to think that blue hydrogen is a cheaper option to green hydrogen, because we have had historically for a very long time, especially even now, if you look at the United States, for example, you will see that the gas prices do favor this environment where blue hydrogen is cheaper than green hydrogen. But as we're seeing in Europe right now with the prices of gas, that might not always be the case. So you might have a very interesting situation as we go forward, where you have naturally occurring competition between green and blue hydrogen without subsidies. So something to keep in mind that might happen and might develop just through the market forces. So the market forces act on supply demand, and therefore I'm always a great believer that sometimes solves problems better than market intervention and regulation and so on, which is also obviously very important and necessary. But I want to emphasize that in the current environment, with very, very, very high, very expensive gas prices, the role of blue hydrogen, the role of companies like Gazprom are going to be very significant, very important, and something to watch, monitor, understand, pricing, and so on and so forth. So.
I think that's an important point. Thomas, I just want to bring you in, of course, get your top article from the week from the Digest, and if you'd like to build on that too from the comments of Dr. Steve and Joaquin.
Yeah, thank you to all of the members here in this round. Thanks to Gulf Intelligence to have this organization. Let's see it from the perspective from Europe and see it from the finance markets. Not going so much into the engineering technical stuff, what is possible. Sometimes I'm saying everything is possible, it's just the cost behind. But we have here in Europe, and I think worldwide, a different perspective. We have a problem. We have global warming. So we cannot discuss about prices as of today if we cannot see the costs of the future if we do nothing. Okay, so this is for me, from the financial perspective, a fact. And I want to go to your articles. Australia sees opportunities for coal after 2030, okay? Russia says, oh, we're gonna deliver Gazprom. We can deliver gas. So the only thing is what we do is we're gonna do carbon capture as a technical instrument and come into the market of, let's call it blue hydrogen, but we do not change dramatically the production processes. I think Dr. Griffiths, you can clearly support. A steam reformer is a steam reformer, so it's done for years now. You can make it bigger, but the price it's the price. A steam reformer, if you want to produce ammoniac at the end, the hydrogen price is somehow in the area of €1, €1.50, €2, depending on where it is. But that's the price. That's it. It cannot come significantly lower. The point is where we, from the finance parts, look into it. When, Dr. Griffiths, Dr. Naro, when is a steam reformer a distressed asset? This is now the question. That means if we invest into blue hydrogen, we need our old technology. Old means a technology which is used for transforming CH4, natural gas normally, into hydrogen. It was a specific process very strongly related to chemical, who needs the chemical industry, who needed very often the ammoniac industries, that means the fertilizer industry, they needed it. But what we speak now, it's a complete transformation, a rethink of industries. The steel industry never used hydrogen in the past. The cement industry never used it. So if they go for blue hydrogen in order to make a shift very quickly, that's perfect. If Australia says they want to go with coal in the future, what I can say in Germany, we have a long debate, and I'm pretty sure that the next party's elections, what we have in Germany, will not support coal anymore. So the time of coal is gone. And I do not say we will not find coal anymore as attractive in terms of it's not a resource dimension. It's a problem what we have, that we cannot bring out the CO2 of the atmosphere if we think in the logic of the industrial revolutions 200 years back. It helped us to deliver and to bring us to that status what we are in the societies. But now it's the time to make the next step of the society in order to get the next step. And for us, from the financial markets, what we do is we allocate cash. That's it, nothing else. The question what we focus now, and I can just speak in the words of BlackRock, if we invest into a coal-fired plant, when is the asset distressed? Okay, so that means if we plan in 30 years to come to green hydrogen, when is the right time to say blue hydrogen is a transformation process? And I do believe that companies who support oil or gas markets, for sure, they have to go the blue hydrogen way. Absolutely. Yeah. So I completely agree with that. The point is, from the financial markets, whenever you have a chance to adapt to green hydrogen, to adapt to what you can see here, solar, wind, water, hydropower, green produced electricity, green electrons, and transform them into green hydrogen. This is for us the utmost best opportunity to bring also the costs of electrolysis down. So that means if we invest into blue hydrogen, if we go the coal way, like Australia, what you see, if we focus on Gazprom and bringing their gas into Germany, into Europe, transforming into blue hydrogen, from the financial perspective, I do believe we go more the green way. That means we look for opportunities, projects, in order to bring volume of electrolysis into the market and to reduce significantly the price of electrolysis. Because I'm always a little bit shocked. I see so many doctors and PhDs and so on speaking about comparing the price of blue hydrogen compared to green hydrogen. I'm always saying, use a steam reformer of 1 megawatt and produce hydrogen based on that. You will realize it's not possible because it's out of the cost. So, but we compare at the moment a green hydrogen project of a 1 megawatt electrolyzer. So it's completely not comparable. And we had the same situation of solar and wind 15 years back. So if we compared a solar wind farm of 1 megawatt with a 500 megawatt combined cycle power plant, it was unfair to deliver. You know, it was not comparable. This is the same situation we have here. So summary, blue hydrogen makes sense for parties for the next years if they already in. But for financial markets, we have to go the green way, what I believe. And if a country believes, like Australia, coal is still important, I do think is, yes, if you see the distressed ways of your assets, go the coal way, because the financial markets will come back to you and give you on short and bring your equity down.
Dr. Steve, I'd just like to bring you in on that, just to further give comments towards what Thomas is saying. But I also want to, we're seeing in the headlines here closer to home, all this massive push into hydrogen, green, blue, whatever it might be. We have the Oman Hydrogen Alliance that was in that news digest. We have the Abu Dhabi Hydrogen Council. ADNOC's been looking for partnerships. Of course, Khalifa University is a big part of that ecosystem in R&D. The visions have been kind of put forward, and the investments there. Next step is the actual implementation phase. And what are the challenges that you're seeing that might come about as everyone hits the ground running towards implementation?
Well, the challenge with hydrogen in general is right now it is an idea. that we'd like to realize. I mean, outside of refining and ammonia production, there's really not that much hydrogen being used, and almost all of it's gray, right? So we're not talking clean hydrogen. So I think when we're talking about clean hydrogen, we're looking at how we're going to build demand and build supply in parallel, and that's a trick, because right now low cost electricity, it works, right, economically. So, and when you tender for power, renewable power from solar energy works, but hydrogen is a different story. So I think what we need to do in the region is we're looking out at the future is we need to have a strategy that says, okay, to build hydrogen economy, whether it's local or it's global, you have to have the ability to have supply and demand. You have to have the ability to take hydrogen from one point of production to the point of use. And so transmission distribution, not there in a robust way at the moment, still very costly. And you need underpinning policies to make all this work. So I'd say, going back to the arguments we've been making, and it kind of relates to the green, the blue, and then the question about where the challenges lie. I would say you need to be very clear top down today, because you do have this difficult chicken egg situation on where you want to take your industries, whether or not they're going to be the users and consumers of hydrogen or the producers of hydrogen, how you're going to balance blue and green and what your transition will look like, and have a very clear roadmap. So what are your targets for electrolyzers? What are your targets for CO2 storage or utilization if you're going the blue route? How will you slowly play down? What will an ADNOC do? What will a Gazprom do over time if you're looking from the Russia perspective or the UAE perspective? How do you build the demand, right? So if you're going to have the ability to make all this hydrogen, you need partners. So are you going to work now in bilateral relationship with Korea, Japan, Germany, start to get an ability to produce something which they can use? If it's blue, if it's turquoise, which again gets rid of the CO2 problem, creates just pure carbon, whatever is your approach, how do you start the process? Make sure you're moving in a direction that allows you to scale up what you're doing, check the boxes that you've seen, how the transmission, distribution, shipping, for instance. Are you going to ship by liquefied hydrogen? Are you going to ship by ammonia? Are you going to ship by liquid organic hydrogen carriers? What are the research areas you have to pursue to make that economical? Can't get back hydrogen from ammonia unless you find a better way to crack the ammonia, if you're going to use that as your way to get your ammonia transport overseas. So I'd say the challenges are being strategic, and we don't yet, to my knowledge, in the UAE and anywhere in the region, have a very, very clear roadmap. Whereas I have, having done a very extensive review of hydrogen, have seen Korea, Japan, EU, Germany, they're starting to build those kind of detailed, logical roadmaps, which are good for them where they are. But now to go international, where we're going to have the region like the GCC start to export, we have to play into that. We have to be very strategic, very roadmap oriented, very KPI oriented, knowing where we want to get 5 years, 10 years, and beyond that. So it's a challenge. It's a big challenge.
I think just on that export comment right there, we've been having conversations here on what an export hub might look like for the UAE for hydrogen. Do you build a hub in which you're exporting hydrogen through let's say steel or manufacturing, that aspect, or do you try to export hydrogen directly? Is that even an option at the moment? What do you think would be the best path forward for the region in that sense?
Well, if it's no regrets, I would say you look at how you can build a hydrogen cluster. They call them hydrogen valleys locally, right? So in the UAE, we've got ammonia production, we've got steel production, we've got refineries, and they all need hydrogen. They all have to decarbonize if they're going to be consistent with the move globally toward decarbonization. So I'd say if you can look at your local industries, try to make them competitive, assuming that there will be some carbon border adjustments, say in the EU, and we know that the UAE, for instance, exports steel to you. Use them, make your initial supply of hydrogen that's low carbon, or at least whatever low carbon standard is going to be for when they start to really impose those border adjustments. Make your local industry competitive. Make this entire country, perhaps, or at least Abu Dhabi, for instance, make that your hydrogen cluster. Supply your local, or supply your refineries and create your ammonia and get your steel going. Build up your capability to do the blue and green. Make your balance well established. And then I think the bilateral relationships, abroad, because today, you're not going to export hydrogen by ship very economically. Work on those, but do the research, do the projects that allow you to really bring down the cost of the export. So if international markets evolve and you're able to compete in those, fantastic. If it's just a matter of making your local industries competitive, there's no regret. You have to do it anyway. So build up your ability to produce economically green and blue hydrogen, whatever color you like, through your local cluster valley. That's how it's happening globally. It's valleys and clusters which are building up. It's not these big international exports that are now taking shape. It's the clusters and valleys.
Dr. Joaquin, I just want to bring you in, talking about other industries' interest in hydrogen. What is the tangible interest that you're seeing from other industries that are, let's say, heavy use of energy outside the energy sector, essentially, in terms of investing into R&D, pilots, talent, and so on? Because essentially, the demand for hydrogen needs to be there across this wide spectrum. What are you seeing in that area?
I mean, there's definitely interest from the industries like the steel manufacturing and so on, which are open to the higher or using hydrogen at a higher scale. But also, I'd like to highlight that through lots of conversation we've been having recently, there is quite an interest from the transportation sector. So the transportation sector on the heavy trucks and so on, which are difficult to decarbonize on the standard electrification process that we might see with the standard cars and vehicles. It is a potential source for hydrogen consumption, but that might scale up. But yeah, so that would be one of them. The transportation, and also as I mentioned, I think the steel manufacturing is one of them that could be opening up and being available. I think overall, the one of the key aspects of the consumption is going to come from the energy, and at the expense of being overly taxing on that sector. I think is the obvious and first one that might come into fruition. So without putting the other ones to one side, I think the focus will continue to be on the electricity energy sector for quite a while.
Thomas, I just want to bring you in as, of course, hydrogen needs to get over the cost competitive aspect of things. And we see subsidies come into the mix a little bit. Do you think hydrogen needs subsidies to get to scale? Or are you seeing something that might be a better approach in a sense?
That's a good question with regard to what's the alternative? Let's say it this way. What's the alternative? Let's make a little bit of an estimation. Forget subsidies, okay? Just say price the CO2 in the product, in the prime energy. What is the potential cost of destruction of value for us on the earth? Let's call it green, let's call it environmental impact factor, a cost. It's a CO2 tax. This is the word of a CO2 tax. Let's forget for subsidies. Let's do everything with the CO2 tax. What will happen is, and we discussed this lengthily in Germany, what will happen is a lot of industry will go bust because you cannot change production facilities from one day to another, okay? So you need a time frame to adapt. So if you accept to this time frame and you cannot use only a CO2 tax, so I think here it's the clear logic for us saying, on the one hand, one instrument, a political instrument, is the CO2 tax, which means it has to go increased every year, a certain value. At the derivatives markets, we realize now that CO2 certificates are now having an all-time high compared to 5 years where it was not of interest anymore. So if we go along that way, use the instrument of CO2 taxation, hopefully worldwide, and European Union is exactly doing that already, saying, if we're gonna tax our local economy and burden them, we cannot accept that outside of Europe production with a high carbon footprint is come in for low cost because it's unfair, which is clear. And this means it's a transformation then also, and we in Europe are the footprint for that road, that we say in the beginning, we need a certain kind of a stimulation. This is the subsidy. The stimulation is the subsidy. But we do not want to stay in the subsidy area because this would mean we accept the gray hydrogen, the gray markets forever. We will not accept. That means gray hydrogen, blue hydrogen will increase in price because you cannot find so many carbon capture opportunities in the long run. But you will find a lot of solar and wind opportunities we just have not invested in and have not looked into worldwide. Where is the best capacities? The MENA region, Dr. Griffiths, you say absolutely. You have now the optimum possibility to bring high solar green electrons into the market and transform it into another energy vector. Start in the MENA region, start with the know-how in order to make the production, in order to bring value into the region, and then start the export. Here, I do believe in Europe, we need a subsidy in order to quickly start come into the green hydrogen. I do not support so much the blue hydrogen economy with subsidies, because this would mean I support the old technology and we just add for carbon capture. That means here the green hydrogen is the necessity to bring the electrolysis cost and the technology into a next step. And we had done the same with solar, and it worked. I think China is the best approach, that you can see how much you can bring costs down if you have optimized, standardized production processes. And here electrolysis and the technologies on PEM technology is at the starting point, in the infant. So we have to bring them in the next 20 years to a completely new status. Here we need subsidies. Subsidies go along with energy taxation rules, hopefully as much as global wide we have it. And to be honest, you will realize already, Brian, if you go to Saudi Arabia, if you go to China and they want to drive with a battery car, okay, does it make sense that all the relating material in a Tesla comes with gray energy related footprint? No, it makes no sense. That means the whole value chain have to be assessed with regard to where we bring CO2 footprints down. And I do believe in Germany, we start now intensively discussing this. And this is also the reason Joachim told about the transport sector, why huge companies are trying now to separate the vehicles going for the, let's call it the private markets of personal cars and the heavy load transport sectors, because you see a shift. If you go everything in one company, you will fail, because the transport combustion chamber is different. The one is a battery area, the one goes potentially with a fuel cell and goes with hydrogen. So we see it from Volkswagen. They are really thinking about and sharing these two markets and separate that. But we need a subsidies now in order to come in 10 years to a green hydrogen environment. Yes.
I just want to, as we're getting close to wrapping up, bring in our survey question real quick. Irene, if you can bring that up on the screen for our guests and of course our panelists to answer. The estimated $15 trillion in investments required from now to 2050 to decarbonize energy and other industries with hydrogen is achievable. Agree or disagree? I feel that some actually may say that's not enough. So if you agree or disagree, if you can answer. Dr. Joaquin, I just want to bring you in while everyone answers the survey question and get your ideas in terms of what that stimulant might be in terms of drawing more investment into the space, and how you do think essentially making, or what route would be the best one to take in making hydrogen more cost effective.
I think the best way to make the carbon cost effective is to some extent to leave the market forces to unfold. And I think this is important, as we're seeing, for example, that the efforts to decarbonize that we're seeing right now are producing a huge commodity inflation, right? So and this is important to give a direction of where those high fuel prices that are coming with this decarbonization are going to make the hydrogen ecosystem an easier and better alternative. So all this leaving the market forces to play up, I think is the best way within a regulatory environment that is supportive to see through the hydrogen ecosystem. I think I'm a great supporter of opening up markets and standardization. So I think that is a key for the success of this market.
Just like Irene, can you bring up the survey results, and we'll give Dr. Steve the final words as we wrap up here. The estimated $15 trillion in investments required from now to 2050 to decarbonize energy and other industries with hydrogen is achievable. Agree or disagree? And it appears that 73% of those who voted agree. Dr. Steve, do you want to just touch on that and what you voted, and why you think that might be the case in this being achievable?
Well, I said yes, and the answer that I gave is based on the thought that there will be sufficient policy frameworks in place to create a pool, meaning there will be a demand created for hydrogen production that's going to be able to stimulate this level of investment. And what I think we need is, we definitely, if there were carbon tax, that would make hydrogen economical, but you can't put that in place today. I mean, you have to have a runway for organizations to be able to see that there will be a new cost coming to utilizing embodied emissions in their materials for direct CO2 substitute hydrogen. They'll use it. I think if you have mandates and you have product standards around electric fuels for aviation, shipping fuels, we're going to have to switch ammonia, carbon emissions from fuel, steel, low carbon, all those kind of long-term, let's say within clear signals in a direction where you cannot have production of your product useful, which are high in carbon intensity. It will allow us to start in relation to invest in great talk about more a market mechanism. And if that worked out, it'd be great, but as I said previously, it's going to take a lot of coordinated production and demand development in the near term.
Thanks very much. Seems that 30 minutes goes by pretty quickly on the podcast, but I just want to again thank Dr. Steve, Dr. Joaquin, and of course Thomas for your insights today. For those who are listening live, feel free to follow them on social media. Of course, follow us at Gulf Intelligence on Twitter and LinkedIn, where we'll be posting this very shortly, as well as soundings and comments from, of course, our discussion. Well, thank you guys very much for joining today. Look forward to remaining in touch and hopefully seeing things progress in this space.
Thank you so much, Brian, for the organization.